The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 1471 The Return of the Warriors. Lex took in a deep breath, allowing the fresh, energy-filled air of the Midnight Realm to fill his lungs. Even though mature realms were filled with greater energies, had more potent laws, and held so much more potential, Lex enjoyed the atmosphere in the Midnight Realm the most. Maybe it was the attachment of a place that was his own, or the fact that he was intrinsically linked to the realm itself through the lotus. Either way, there was no place like home. "There's an issue," Gerard said with a troubled expression. "I just got a report. Someone has been targeting guests from the inn, while outside the inn. All the guests who've been targeted are from a metropolis space station housing a few million living beings, associated with a powerful mining company. Although no one has officially complained to us, we've had other guests report to us that all citizens from that space station have been banned from returning to the inn." "How do you know that the ones being targeted were guests of the inn if they were attacked outside of it?" Lex asked as he checked the inn's satisfaction ratings. It hadn't dropped by much, but there had indeed been a change in it. All his costs had increased by 0.5%, which did not sound like it was a lot. Yet when his daily consumption was an MT, not MP, 0.5% was a tremendous amount. It said that all those who were being targeted all gambled in support of a specific beast army. The beast army has been winning a lot of battles, so naturally it has a lot of supporters, yet only the ones from that space station have been targeted after their wins. How could others even know they gambled on that beast army? "All bets are anonymous," said Lex, though he felt like he knew the answer. "Naturally, after they won, they couldn't help but brag about it publicly," answered Gerard. "The issue now is how to respond to this situation. Technically no crime was committed within the inn, and we have no idea who the perpetrator is. This is a tough situation to resolve." "Not at all," answered Lex. "Send Z and Roland. Have them investigate the situation. Keep their own safety as a priority, and look into who the murderer is. If they think they can apprehend the murderer, bring him in. If they can't, just wait for me to come back. I have to go to the Seraphim Resort. I'm on a deadline and not much time is left." "Do we have the authority to arrest people outside of the inn?" Gerard asked hesitantly. Going out and doing such things in other territories might cause tension between the Midnight Inn and other forces. Fortunately, the security team had caught on to the issue, and it would be resolved soon. "Gerard, if this is a probe, then someone might be expecting a response. Tell Z and Roland to be careful in their actions. Try to stay hidden if they can." "I don't think that will be necessary anymore," said Gerard with an unusual expression. "Oh? How come?" asked Lex. "Well, the situation has been resolved. Apparently, the head of the space station was involved, and this indeed was a probe by them. Someone was instructing them from the background." "How did you find out?" Lex asked. This problem was solved way too quickly. He'd just heard of it and it was already resolved? That sounded much too convenient. "Well, within the origin realm, rainbow-colored lights flew through the vacuum of space, attacking the yellow shield that surrounded the space station. Thousands upon thousands of spaceships lay destroyed, floating all around the station, so that none dared to leave the protection of the ship anymore. Surrender peacefully, and I'll leave you a full corpse," Jimmy said boldly, repeating the words Big Brother Z had taught him. "Otherwise, you should know, the Peacock Warriors are not to be trifled with." An army of peacocks shrieked, the voices carrying even in space, as they waited eagerly for the shields to drop. Chapter 1472 The Return of Old Friends. "Aren't those the Peacock Warriors?" the captain of the space station asked, his voice strained as he looked out at the small army that had surrounded them. "Weren't they participating inside the Midnight Games? What the hell are they doing here?" "That is also what I am wondering," answered a shadowy figure, standing behind the man. "According to my information, a majority of the Peacock Warriors are an independent force with no actual connection to the inn. Why would they respond to the bait we laid out?" "And why the hell are they so strong?" the captain asked, his eyes turning red. "I've hunted asteroid beetles easier to kill than them." Asteroid beetles. Those things eat through asteroid fields and have radioactive skin. They're immune to lasers and can shrug off artillery shells like they're enjoying the rain. Yet these measly humans are stronger than them? How does that make any sense? How are they even surviving in space without any gear? The shadowy figure had also noticed the anomaly. These humans, despite being very young, were much too powerful. Most of them were in the golden core realm, with quite a few already nascent level cultivators already. Considering their young age, that was already enough to label them beyond a genius. The average human genius reaches the nascent level at the age of 100, and that's with an abundance of resources. Yet now there were hundreds of such humans, casually riding peacocks in outer space, defying all logic. It hardly matters. We probed and got a response. Even this is good enough. As promised, I've created a new identity for you, as well as funds double the liquid worth of your space station. Your emergency escape teleportation formation is also in place. Now you just need to stick to our deal and complete the probe. Your scans indicate the absence of any immortals. Now we don't know if this is an independent action by the Peacock Warriors, or an unsanctioned one. Either way, the death of these warriors will give us more information on how the IN responds. Deploy the Iridus Mechs. The captain calmed down upon hearing the shadowy figure's words. He was right. Regardless of what happened to the station, or what kinds of losses it suffered, it no longer had anything to do with him. It was just tough not to get emotional seeing the severe losses to the station when he had spent so many years on it. The captain activated the protocol to deploy the station's strongest weapons, Iridus Mech. These mechs weren't really at the level of immortals. For most places in the universe, immortals were rare and powerful. Expecting a random mining space station to have an immortal-level weapon on board was ludicrous, at least unless they were mining something beyond something simply valuable. 3 gray box-like mechs with short wings and a whole lot of weapons flew out of the station. The mechs were not fast, nor were they tough, yet they packed the most powerful offense of anything and anyone on the station. Shooting from behind the station's shields, they were perfectly capable of eliminating any nascent-level threat. The mechs go ready to attack again, to see if the first failure was a fluke, but it was too late. Jimmy had fully charged his attack, so he did not hesitate at all. Both the rider and the peacock seemed to turn into a beam of rainbow-colored light that shot forward, oddly, in the shape of a jousting stick. The attack was lightning-quick and silent. One moment Jimmy was far away, the next he tore through the protective shield around the space station as if it were a wet tissue, shattering the whole thing. The 3 mechs fared no better, for they were the original targets to begin with. The beam of light cut through them as if they were mere projections instead of real objects, causing an explosion so devastating it completely eradicated what was left of the shield. Even the Peacock Warriors who were nearby retreated rapidly, unwilling to risk getting caught in that shockwave, while the space station suffered the worst. Its outer hull was completely eradicated, exposing the interior to the vacuum, further exacerbating the damage. That was just from the initial blast, with the shockwave to follow. Yet even Jimmy, who had torn through a shield and 3 mechs, had momentum to spare. As a result, he cut through the station as if it was butter. Yet, surprisingly, he harmed not a single resident of the station, mainly due to the fact that they had been evacuated to the inner layers of the station. But also because this was far from an unplanned operation. The countless Peacock Warriors surrounding the station dashed into the station, not allowing the opponent a chance to recover and respond. Jimmy, we have a message from the Rose Society. They've sabotaged an escape formation near the captain's quarters. We're free to move into the final phase of the operation, said the peacock Jimmy was riding. Affirmative, Jimmy said as he rubbed his jaw. There was something about turning his physical body into a beam of light that always caused his jaw to hurt, and he couldn't figure out why. At the same time, he thought of the Rose Society, the secret organization set up by Old Man Will, his mother's former boss. The organization was originally supposed to be a charity, but after the fall of the Earth, and with the recent disappearance of Will Bentham, the society became the only way to contact the enigmatic man. He had somehow embedded himself deep into the business world of the origin realm, and had amassed far more power than one would have expected from someone without a background. It was only recently that Jimmy was approached by Hugo, Will's old bodyguard, and shared some information with him. It seemed that for years, Old Man Will and Hugo had been working in secret to uncover the traces of Jeffrey, who was responsible for so much pain on Earth. It had turned out that the death of Hugo's family was also a consequence of one of Jeremy's ploys, and Will had sworn to Hugo to help him get revenge. With the fall of Sanguis Pluvia, Rose Society got their hands on a lot of information, things that even the Midnight Inn had missed. Chapter 1473. A lot to think about. Getting their hands on information, in and of itself, was not a big deal. What was a big deal was that they had uncovered a conspiracy specifically targeting the Midnight Inn. Though the inn claimed to be uninvolved in the fall of Sanguis Pluvia, few believed it, and as a result many wanted revenge. While Sanguis Pluvia itself had been removed from the origin realm, that did not mean that the realm was at peace, or that there were no more rogue elements in it. Although there was hardly any force in the origin realm that could challenge the Midnight Inn, not unless one of the guest Dao Lords got involved, it did not mean other more powerful and influential organizations couldn't make use of them to begin placing the pieces against the inn. It did not even need to be the destruction of the inn itself that they achieved. Since the inn was so focused on being a business, then disrupting their business by targeting their guests was one way of doing things. Of course, dealing with all of that was the job of someone far more senior than Jimmy. For him, this was just an opportunity to get some real-world experience with the Peacock Warriors. Although they had been fighting in the Midnight Games, it became a bit tedious since their patterns were easy to learn. More importantly, their peacocks had a huge advantage against insects, easily slaying them, so the actual warriors hardly got to exert themselves. To be fair, the peacocks technically were stronger than most of the actual warriors. It couldn't be helped. Such was the consequence of living in the Midnight Inn from birth. Jimmy didn't hesitate, and led his noble mount through the path he had memorized off a map, and arrived at the captain's room. He had hardly taken a few seconds since he got the message about the formation being sabotaged, yet the scene he encountered was completely unexpected. The formation, as promised, was destroyed. Yet alongside the destroyed formation was the captain, which would have been a good thing except that he was dead. The room looked like a small hurricane had passed through it, with all the furniture and electronics flung all over. Less concerned with the cleanliness and more with the dead captain. Jimmy quickly approached him and checked his condition, but the man could not be saved. "Can you find out if the Rose Society did this too?" Jimmy asked his mount. That wasn't according to plan. The greater problem was that if he was weak, then Anita would not be better off. It seemed like they needed to get some work in after the baby was born. Jimmy, meanwhile, did not let the death of the target distract him, although he was quite disappointed that he couldn't capture the captain alive. His personal feelings, however, would have to wait, for following the attack on the space station was the rescue operation. Those living in the station would not survive now that the station had been destroyed, so all of them needed to be brought to the inn as temporary refugees while rescue ships were brought to the site of the space station. Overseeing such a large operation was quite different from the many operations he had managed as a kid. Everything had much more of an element of unpredictability. Fortunately, he was a lot stronger now, and was a quick learner. He would not make the same mistake again, especially since Big Brother Z would be guiding him. The operation continued, while in the Midnight Realm Gerard shared all the information he got with Lex, who frowned slightly. "Increase the number of staff training at the temple," said Lex softly. "I don't know what we can expect, but it'll be best if we're sufficiently prepared." To be fair, Lex expected to have a few thousand Earth Immortals in the next few decades, which would make the inn a formidable force. But it would have a severe lack of stronger workers. Lex turned his attention to Zagan, who was still meditating in a corner somewhere. The monster was on the verge of becoming a heavenly immortal. Lex didn't want to push him to speed things up, but he also couldn't be devoid of a stronger fighting force. He himself also didn't want to become a heavenly immortal till he reached his limit as an Earth immortal. There was a lot to think about. Chapter 1474. I don't adhere to common sense. How much longer until the midnight games end? Lex asked. He knew the answer, obviously, but he asked anyway. 3 months, Mary said. And how many workers are we sending to the Temple of Fasting at any given time? Well, considering the massive crowds we've gathered, and the increased influx we're expecting for the finale, we prioritize those who need to immediately break through. Besides those, we send a few more, so that at no time do we have more than 2,000 workers at the temple. Alright, after the midnight games end, we need to increase that number drastically. We need to talk to the trainers at the temple and figure out a timeline. Within 100 years I want more than 50% of all workers to be Earth immortals, and within 1,000 years I want at least 10 heavenly immortals. Mary snorted and rolled her eyes. I think your easy success has gone to your head, she said frankly. Easy? What's easy about my success? No wait, that's besides the point. What's wrong with my timeline? Lex asked with a frown. I studied the Artica realm's history. Although the realm matured 3,000 years ago, the bank formally initiated their relationship with the Artica race only 1,000 years ago. During that time the bank no doubt helped them a lot, but they've also begun setting up the pieces to potentially undermine the Artica realm. You said they're very difficult to influence externally, not impossible. Lex caught on to the hidden meaning in her sentences. How do we do that? There are many ways. Obviously there are many ways, for every force in existence will always want to strengthen their own people. But it is a slow process. You cannot hope for quick results. The first, most common method is to discuss the laws with peers, as well as receive lessons from seniors. However, each person perceives laws differently, so any lesson or advice can only be taken as a reference. Your own individual comprehension is extremely important, which is why a majority of all those who achieve the immortal realm never even make it to the second level of Earth Immortal. But I thought being in a new realm was supposed to help with the comprehension of laws, and speed up growth. Isn't that why Dao Lords value immature realms? So that they can witness the process of it maturing? That's true, but you need to understand that speed up does not mean it can happen within 1,000 years. You still view time through the lens of a mortal, probably because of the immense sense of danger you always feel. Across most of the wider universe, among immortals anyone below the age of 100,000 is still considered a child, and between 100,000 and 1,000,000 they are considered to be maturing. None of this helps me right now, Lex said, diverting the topic back to the matter at hand. So far, the Inn has faced some serious threats, but never an organized and well-planned-out threat from a powerful, universal force. Unless I can get my hands on another full-powered butter knife, I don't see us escaping from it without accumulating strength. So the question isn't about why it's so hard to achieve 10 heavenly immortals in 1,000 years. The question is how can we make that happen, and potentially even increase that number. Hey, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that you should have realistic expectations going into this. Nothing about my life makes sense or adheres to basic common sense. I don't see why it should start now, Lex said firmly. Chapter 1475 Contribution. Mary sighed, and leaned back in a projection of a chair that suddenly appeared behind her. She rubbed her finger under her chin for a while, as if lost in thought. Lex didn't disturb her either. After all, he was the one who had asked her for a way to help others improve quickly. Upon greater consideration, he really had thought of the immortal realm too lightly. It was obvious that growing through the levels would not be easy or simple. While he himself had reached the peak of the realm, Lex attributed a part of it to his cultivation technique, which enhanced his comprehension and perception, while the other half was due to the accumulated treasures he had absorbed into his body. But his rapid growth also wasn't a good thing. While in terms of levels he had reached the peak, he was far from being as strong as he could be in this realm. Back when he was in the nascent realm, he had pushed himself to such an extent that he literally had to seal himself to prevent growth in his realm. Within the immortal realm, he had a tremendous amount of leeway yet, which is why he planned on strengthening himself a great deal more before attempting to reach the next level. He was not too concerned about it though. Based on his experiences, he doubted it would even take him a century. I have thought of 2 ways in which you can achieve your goal, Mary said finally. The first and most obvious way is to rely on the system. The more you grow the inn, and the more you rely on the rewards of various quests, the better opportunities you will find for yourself and others. The second way is not only much more difficult to achieve, it is drastically more dangerous, especially for mere earth immortals. If you or your workers try to use it, you should absolutely mentally prepare yourself for multiple casualties. Even if you only use a team of absolutely elite and powerful immortals, the best of the best, as mere earth immortals, their lives will be in constant danger. Stop teasing and tell me already, said Lex, understanding that his holographic assistant was trying to impress upon him exactly how dangerous this would be. Then again, a way for earth immortals to quickly become heavenly immortals could not, by its very definition, be easy. I cannot tell you specifically. All I can say is that you should look into realm breaks. Lex didn't bother getting into the usual conversation of why she couldn't tell him stuff. Instead, he directly reached out to his usual sources of information, scouring the place for any information on them. Yet, for once, the usual suspects had no answer. Or, to be more accurate, there were millions of things called realm breaks, including but not limited to candy, sleeping pills, cultivation seals, a particularly notorious beast octopus that was also an adult content creator, as well as various other things, none of which had anything to do with becoming a heavenly immortal. Even the 2 rhino centaurs could not provide Lex with an answer, though they did make a request to meet the innkeeper for something which could apparently help them increase their information-gathering capabilities. Can you promise me that you'll have access to more classified information if you receive a system? The innkeeper asked. His expression was so casual, it was as if he could not care less about systems at all. As if they were completely beneath him. But, as members of the group chat, they knew for certain that Tao Lords are not necessarily stronger than systems or system users. With that information, it did not take a genius to understand just how powerful the innkeeper probably was. Yes, yes. The better the system, the more access we can get to secret information, the rhino centaurs answered. Understood. For now, you can continue operating as you have been. If you make a significant enough contribution, I will arrange for a system for you. The 2 rhino centaurs looked at each other, hesitation and excitement filling their eyes. If you want, we can potentially share information on system users and leads on systems, they volunteered. Naturally, a large part of the group chat was dedicated towards tracking and hunting down system users. They could also get their hands on various equipment which could help hunting down system users. At the moment, this is not necessary, said the innkeeper. In the future, if you have any matters relating to systems you wish to talk about, you can find Lex. In fact, I will send you to him right now so that you all can form some kind of understanding. He has a matter he should consult you on. Once again, the 2 were promptly teleported away, and when they reappeared they were inside Lex's penthouse. Lex, who seemed to be in the middle of a meal, was surprised to find them suddenly appear in his apartment, yet before he had an opportunity to ask them what was happening, understanding filled his eyes. Did you guys really go up to the innkeeper and offer to help him hunt down system users? Lex asked, wearing a bewildered look. You guys do realize we're an inn, right? Hunting people across the universe is not exactly in line with our image. Lex did not focus on the fact that just a while ago, he completely justified hunting people across the universe to Gerard. The circumstances were completely different here. More importantly, he couldn't allow the 2 rhino centaurs to develop any such ideas. No, nothing like that, the rhino centaurs quickly tried to explain. We just mentioned that we might hear news of criminals who might potentially have a system. You know, if he wants. Sure. If he wants. Got it. Anyway, put that idea out of your head. The Midnight Inn does not go around hunting people for no reason, Lex said. That said, we do take everything that happens within the inn very seriously. There's a guest who was targeted by a system ability before he was at the inn, and is still being affected by it. Since you guys have so much experience with systems, Do you know any way that ability can be blocked out? The two rhino-centaurs looked at each other, this time a very serious expression on their faces. Was this, perhaps, the contribution that the innkeeper was talking about? Chapter 1476 Casually Making Money. There is no one-size-fits-all answer for such a situation, the rhino-centaurs said. The answer can generally be determined by looking at a couple of things. The first would be the kind of ability used by a system. For example, if a target is being tracked by a system, which is relatively a loose connection, then there is a chance that the target can escape the system's grasp. If the ability is more of a core function of the system, such as a beast tamed by a taming system, then it is much more difficult, if not entirely impossible, to escape its grasp. The only possible way to get out of such a situation would be to use another system's ability to counter it. But then the second ability would have to somehow perfectly negate the ability of the first system. It's not like any random ability would work. The second thing to look at, when trying to negate a system ability, is the rank of the system involved. The higher the system ranking, the harder it is to avoid or remove. For example, I once heard of a guy who got marked as a repeat customer by a B-ranked system. Later on, that seemingly insignificant acknowledgement led to that person's identity being compromised, and he was assassinated. The person involved was a heavenly immortal who was adept in camouflage, and yet he was easily recognized by a system user. So you don't have any means to hide from a system's detection? Lex asked, seriously studying the two rhino-centaurs. He had long suspected, and practically confirmed, that they were somehow connected to a group of people who hunt systems and system users. Heck, Lex even thought about the possibility that the rhino-centaurs, as well as everyone else in their community, were under the influence of an even stronger system. These were things he could not confirm, but he could take advantage of. Their insight already proved invaluable. It made sense that the type of connection mattered. For example, Lex would not be happy if he found out one day that an employees could suppress their connection to the inn, then it would be devastating. In a lot of ways, that connection was just as much a protection for the workers as it was for the inn. It kept them from betraying the inn, which would be pretty important in a situation where any inn worker was kidnapped. He was also fairly certain that the go board he was a part of was a pretty central ability of a system if it indeed was caused by a system. Still, it was good to be sure. The two rhino-centaurs looked at each other, and remained silent for a bit, almost as if lost in contemplation. Of course, Lex was certain that they were secretly communicating somehow. Eventually, though, one of them showed an extremely pained expression, and then took out a cloak from his spatial ring, or at least it appeared that way. This might work against some weaker systems of level C and below, the rhino-centaur said as he handed Lex. It also depends on the ability. How does it work? Lex asked as he grabbed it, and immediately began studying it using his left eye's ability and his own spirit sense. Unfortunately, if there was something extraordinary about the cloak, it escaped his notice, which he supposed was the point. The user just needs to wrap it around their body and channel some energy into it, and it should begin working. Just remember, it hides from pre-existing system abilities, it does not defend from new ones. It was a regular piece, and Lex couldn't understand the relevance of it, especially since it did not affect him in any way. Yet he dared not dismiss it either. For a brief moment, Lex considered trying something with divine energy. That unusual energy, which could even create miracles, might do the trick. But it was also a finite resource, and Lex didn't think it would work. He wasn't in a desperate situation just yet, so he didn't try it. Instead, he diverted his focus on something else. He contacted Vera, and asked her if there were any oracles who wanted to get their souls cleansed. She was still upset about losing her abilities, and she nagged him a bit, but eventually she helped out. As it turned out, there was quite a massive list waiting for him. No one wanted to bother him, despite being quite desperate themselves, for they didn't want to end up provoking him somehow. If he decided that he suddenly didn't want to help because the oracles had been annoying him, then they would regret it forever. Although such a thing wouldn't really happen, it wasn't as if the others knew that. So, he asked her to connect him to some of them, and began cleansing their souls. Within their souls, many of them had smell specks of shards of tribulation lightning, eating away at their very existence. Those whose lightning shards weren't too concentrated only suffered excruciating pain, while others had their actual souls devoured by the lightning constantly zapping them. Lex himself found the lightning shards to be quite a tonic. It was like a nice, soothing massage, helping him relieve the tension in his muscles. But, since there wasn't any actual benefit, Lex gathered most of the shards, put them in a bottle, and put the bottle in the gift shop. It wasn't every day that one could buy lightning in a bottle, so he priced it quite high, at 100 million MP per small bottle containing 10 shards and 90 specks of lightning. Lex was mentally prepared for the bottles to stay in the gift shop for a very long time, and so focused entirely on helping the oracles. Yet within only a few minutes of putting them up, the bottles disappeared. That was one of the benefits of having millions of people at the inn visiting for the games. There was a large variety of them, and they all needed various things. But after putting up only a few bottles, Lex had to stop. Most of the oracles who wanted this service didn't live inside the inn, and a message would have to be sent to them. Lex briefly considered meeting the angels to help out with their wings, but his intuition was warning him against meeting them. So, with no other excuse to keep him there, Lex finally brought out the ticket to the Seraphim Resort. Chapter 1477. Stop procrastinating. There was a reason Lex had been putting off going to the resort. He had a quest with a time limit hanging over him, yet repeatedly he pushed back going to the resort. It wasn't because Lex was averse to the idea, but because his intuition had been warning him to keep a distance from angels. The warning wasn't a subtle reminder either, as if letting him know that if he met the angels he'd face another inconvenient quest like the main character from a video game. Rather, this was like common sense telling a mortal not to walk onto the site of an impending nuclear explosion. Even if he didn't consciously pay attention to it, the feeling was there, in the back of his mind, subtly nudging him away from it. It was only when he was consciously faced with two decisions, both heavily involving angels, that he finally realized that he had been subconsciously avoiding both of them. But now that he had acknowledged it, the dam had burst, and Lex was exposed to the full brunt of how severely his instincts were warning him. Truthfully, it wasn't that strong right up until he wanted to take action. Then his instincts warned him like he was about to walk into his own death. Obviously, meeting angels to heal their wings put him in direct contact with angels, so the warning made sense. But as it turned out, so did going to the resort. It made sense, considering that the Seraphim Resort was within a realm that contained angels. But he couldn't avoid going to the resort, so the question was, what was so dangerous about just meeting angels? More importantly, what were the governor's intentions giving him this ticket? Lex didn't believe that the leader of the Hanali, as well as a powerful Tao Lord, would be unaware of it if there were something significant happening regarding angels. Lex himself had very limited connections to the powerful forces of the universe, and even he had learned something about it, which meant those with better connections than him surely knew. What was more important was, why did merely going close to them get him sucked into their mess? Lex sat and thought about what to do for a while. As much as he wanted to just go and deal with things as they came, he was more mature now. Well, at least Lex was more mature now. By channeling all his shenanigans into Jack, he hardly ever felt the urge to do something ridiculous just for the heck of it. Since there was danger, he would treat this very seriously. The first thing he had to do was consider all his precautions. His karma-hiding treasure still hadn't been manufactured, and probably wouldn't be any time soon either. As it turned out, creating very powerful and potent treasures without cheat-like hacks was not easy. Of course, he had a feeling that if they really tried they could make it quickly and easily, but that was besides the point. Besides, when push came to shove, what Lex always relied on was the Midnight Inn anyway. With his decision made, Lex got up and went to Jeeves, who was in the middle of taking measurements for an especially loud fiery mammoth who had transformed into a human shape. "Need to look good for the show-off, Jeeves," the mammoth said, wearing a large grin. He turned to look at Lex, who had just entered the tailor shop, and asked, "Little human, do you gamble?" Lex was not expecting to meet a friendly fiery mammoth, but there was no reason to be mean to him. Eventually though, everything was set, and Lex ran out of reasons to procrastinate. Lex was too used to listening to his instincts, not going against them, which is why it was quite tough for him, especially when they were so strong. "Oh, I've got just the thing for you," Jeeves said, rubbing his hands in excitement. "I just imported a special material that'll suit your needs and more, but there's one catch. The suit is going to come out tan-colored, won't be the usual black suit worn by the staff." Lex raised an eyebrow. "A non-standard color suit? I think I'll survive." "How long will it take?" "Not long. I just need to take your measurements again. Something tells me your weight has gone up again, and this time we have a special on shoes for our heavier customers." Lex's smile dropped from his face, but Jeeves didn't seem to notice. Ignoring the weight, which was incorrect because the system was broken and barely had a 40% functionality, the measurement went fine and Jeeves managed to make the suit in a couple of days. During that time, Lex honed his sword a bit and studied karma a bit more. He bought a number of more karma-related techniques from the Emporium, but he hadn't had time to go through them all. Unfortunately, they were not so easy to learn. Eventually though, everything was set, and Lex ran out of reasons to procrastinate. Lex was too used to listening to his instincts, not going against them, which is why it was quite tough for him, especially when they were so strong. Lex ripped the coupon and immediately felt a power of some sort lock onto his body, covering him in a protective shield. Now that he thought about it, the keys from the inn probably did the same, but much faster. The next moment, Lex teleported, leaving the Midnight Realm behind and being brought into some kind of light show. Outside his protective cover, strange lights flashed, forming objects and strange shapes, but each of them came and went by faster than he could observe them. The process did not last too long, barely a few minutes, but when it ended, Lex suddenly found himself in a brand new realm. The weight of the laws of the new realm falling down on him was like a nice, soothing massage. That was not an illusion, for the acclimation process to the new laws of the realm had specifically been designed to be comfortable by the resort. The stronger gravity did not bother him, and the brightness of the light in his surroundings didn't bother him either. Lex fixed his tie as he looked at his surroundings, and found himself standing in front of a large building carved out of a single piece of stone. Above him shone a magnificent yellow star, surrounded by a luminescent ring of some unknown rock. It was filled to the brim with overwhelming divine energy, just as every inch of the place was filled with vibrant, potent energy that made Lex feel like he was being rejuvenated just standing there. Chapter 1478 Quick History Lesson. Even a mature realm, despite its many advantages, which included but were not limited to treasures that could be at the Tao level, did not have the same vibrancy of energy that a newborn realm did. In fact, a newborn realm had energy types that mimicked the kind of energy that appeared at the birth of the universe. That energy would be completely used up as the realm matured, giving birth to other kinds of more stable yet less potent energies. That was not necessarily a bad thing, it was just the way it was. Even so, Lex rarely felt more comfortable or at home than inside the inn. Considering his cultivation technique had never failed to absorb any kind of energy so far, he always preferred the ones from the Midnight Realm. Yet, now here, at the resort, as his body was bathed in a unique blend of divine energy, Lex discovered that this was a splendid experience like no other. In fact, Lex closed his eyes and withdrew his spirit energy so that he could focus solely on what was happening in his body. He observed as every fiber of his body underwent a literal and somehow spiritual cleansing. His cultivation technique left no room for any kind of flaw or redundant material in his body, which was something most other cultivators experienced. For example, body cultivators might reinforce their body by absorbing some metals into their system, which worked wonderfully at the beginning, but once they reached the immortal realm started to hold them back. That was just one random example of the kinds of things that would ordinarily be purged from cultivators' bodies when they came to the resort and experienced whatever was happening to Lex. But spiritual cleansing was another thing altogether. Back when he was a mortal, Lex had experienced all kinds of emotions ranging from nervousness to anger, to excitement and embarrassment and so on. Those feelings often manifested not just in his mind, but as physical sensations in his body. Sometimes, those feelings, if repeated too often, could manifest as diseases and illnesses. For cultivators, it was much the same, but the repercussions were much greater. It was not just emotions that manifested as physical sensations, but their techniques, their karma, their intents, and countless other things. For Lex especially, who absorbed literally everything powerful he ever came across, the marks left behind were even greater. It was not a problem, though, since the rate at which he was growing was so rapid that the burden of the marks left behind could never catch up with his capacity to tolerate them. Now, though, they were cleansed anyway. When the primordial Aurelian, hero of the Age of Memories, joined the Holy Crusade, the war ended, and the defilers defeated and exiled to the corners of the universe, the resort lost its purpose. Yet by then it had a robust foundation, and so Orythanor repurposed it and turned it into a resort, but only for Tao lords. For a long time after that, the Seraphim Resort served as the center of Seraphim diplomacy across the universe, and saw the birth of countless resolutions that have shaped the universe to this day. It was no surprise to Lex that as they walked through the building, the murals moved, perfectly depicting the powerful entities that were being mentioned, and added gravitas to the story. Although Lex had never heard of these people before, nor had he heard of these events, the great depth of emotion depicted in the murals was infectious, allowing him to sense just how great an influence these events had on history. Of course, Lex did not let himself be swayed. He was sure that the version of history being told, while true, was probably heavily whitewashed to favor the Seraphim. He did not blame them or consider it malicious. Instead, he was taking notes. He needed to add 3 things to the inn that the resort and the inn did not. Unfortunately, Lex did not have a cool story as background for the inn. Though, he did note that inadvertently the inn seemed to be developing a strong connection to the humanoid alliance. Maybe, after billions of years, he could link the inn to that somehow. For now though, leaving it with a mysterious purpose and background, just like the equally mysterious Innkeeper, was good enough. Eventually, though, Xandarath the Wingbreaker opened up the resort to the whole universe, allowing even lower-level cultivators. Since then, the influence of Seraphim has only increased drastically, and the reputation of the resort grew as well. Now, even though the resort still primarily hosts Tao lords, it has also become the prime destination for countless other visitors from across the universe to relax and rejuvenate. It also provides a perfectly safe and secure location to conduct business, undergo cultivation breakthroughs, or serve as a resting spot between travel. Most recently, the resort was used as a site by members of the acclaimed Phoenix clan to give birth to a new generation of golden phoenixes, taking advantage of the security of the resort to pass their brief period of weakness that they experience post-childbirth. It was quite a privilege for the resort to have such trust, and marks the continued trust and relationship between the Seraphim and the Phoenixes. Your stay here is scheduled for 2 weeks, though naturally you can extend that if you so wish. During these 2 weeks, a number of services and activities have been planned for you, so you may enjoy the various benefits that we offer, and completely relax and rejuvenate yourself. The distinguished guest who booked the package for you mentioned to us that your body may be suffering from the strain of being exposed to a Tao Lord, and so the first order of business is to allow you to decontaminate. Chapter 1479 Exam I. Lex raised an eyebrow. He was given the ticket by the governor, who had inadvertently exposed Lex to his aura outside of the inn. The man, or rather the Henali, had taken many precautions at the time to ensure Lex came to no harm as a result of his aura. Even if he had left some traces, it only made sense that the man should have expected the innkeeper to take care of it. But perhaps making arrangements to have Lex cleansed of any lingering effects of his aura himself was a way of appearing respectful of the innkeeper's staff. It was too difficult to guess the extent of his planning and intentions, but Lex had to admit that his impression of the governor had improved somewhat. What does that include? Lex asked Lycanderoth, noticing that the murals were now changing. Instead of showing the history of the resort, they switched to showing the long-standing friendship between the Seraphim and the Phoenixes. Beyond the fact that the Seraphim offered them protection, the fact that they both seemed to have bodies made of glowing light made them quite similar and thereby likely to form a friendship. The difference was that the Seraphim seemed to be made of pure light, while the phoenixes looked like they were made of flames. Now, however, the murals were changing once more to show massive structures and powerful figures. Lex had a feeling that instead of showing Tao lords, the murals just showed vague figures which carried a heavy aura. That is how Arethanor, Aurelian, and Xandarath had been shown at least. Now, though, dozens of such figures seemed to appear in the mural, drowning Lex in their powerful aura. Fortunately, despite communicating the depth of the auras were all actually quite gentle, so Lex was not affected by them. These were such basic ideas, but he could already see how their implementation could improve the inn. Lycanderoth escorted Lex to another room. Although it looked like they had exited the building and entered an open area, Lex could tell that the surroundings were being manipulated by the same power that changed all the murals around him previously. He was still inside that first building. "Please lie down on the bed," Lycanderoth said. "I will attach a few body scanners, and the examination will begin shortly. Your exam today will be conducted by Demi-Dao Lord Irismia, who has extensive experience in medicine as well as power control, so you do not need to fear being accidentally infected by her aura." Lex lay down in what looked remarkably similar to a hospital bed, wondering if he should take off his blazer. Yet Lycanderoth did not seem bothered at all, and instead started to attach countless wired nodes all over Lex's body, making him look like some kind of alien. The seraphim was quite thorough, and attached over 1,000 nodes all over his body, checking and rechecking to ensure they were in the correct place. It was only once he was done that he took a step back, and sent a signal for the examiner to come in. The room looked like an open garden, as if he were in a tamed forest. It was an unusual concept for a room, but it was quite relaxing, so he didn't mind. After a small wait, another seraphim entered into the room, and this one was larger than Lycanderoth in every single way. Chapter 1480 Exam 2. "Please relax," said Irismia, her voice soft and quite feminine even though her appearance was significantly shocking. "This is going to take a short while. Do not resist, and allow the process to occur naturally." Though she had no aura that Lex could sense, and his instincts weren't reacting to her, Lex hadn't forgotten that Lycanderoth had mentioned that she was a Demi-Dao Lord. Lex was not about to disobey a Demi-Dao Lord, or show any signs of disrespect. Even if the resort claimed to be perfectly safe and that they wouldn't harm guests, he'd rather not test the policy himself against someone he couldn't even hope to contest. A green light began flowing through the wires, and entered into his body. It was warm and delicate, as if it would be interrupted by the slightest flow of energy that he displayed. Lex guessed that this was a way to allow guests to feel like they weren't being taken advantage of. If they could stop the examination whenever they felt like, then there was no reason to fear it. Lex closed his eyes and focused on the energy, but discovered that he couldn't track it at all. He could sense it as it entered his body, but then it disappeared entirely, completely undetectable to his senses. So, he decided to focus on something else. He tried to figure out what the energy entering his body actually was, and how it was being used to conduct an investigation. He'd never experienced anything like that. Just as Lex began to focus, the exam came to an abrupt end. "This is beyond my scope," Irismia said in an urgent yet somehow calm manner. "We need to summon a Dao Lord. What tier package does the guest have?" "A premium package," Lycandero responded quickly. "Is the contamination great?" This time, the room was dark, as if the sun had set over the forest he was in, and a day had gone by. Or multiple days, he couldn't be sure. To be more accurate, the source of contamination seems to be a technique called 10 tribulations. Does it ring any bells? "Yes," Lex responded. "It was given to me by the same person who gave me a coupon for the resort." 10 tribulation was a technique that had been created by the governor himself, and had been given to Lex at the same time as he received the Jorlam's hearts as well as the coupon for the resort. The technique combined sword intent and lightning, and was incredibly powerful. Not only did it immediately become one of Lex's most powerful techniques, but it was a source of great insight for him into combining different concepts. He had stopped using it when Cassandra hinted that it might not be such a good idea. After all, he was not short of techniques or powerful sources of offense. If he hadn't, then would the contamination have been even greater? It seems that whoever gave you the technique was incredibly generous, the voice commented, a hint of approval hidden within. Using a technique designed by a Tao Lord is far from simple, and carries heavy restrictions. In fact, under the right circumstances, the infection can be so great that the user of the technique eventually morphs into a clone for the Tao Lord instead of the independent person they originally were. Whoever gave you the technique anticipated the infection you would get from it, and prepared to allow you to have a great harvest, while not suffering from any long-term consequences from it either. Once I cleanse the contamination, all information about the technique should also vanish, but any insight you've gained should remain. I suppose it's entirely up to you how much you gain from this opportunity. Lex groaned. He couldn't decide if this was a good thing or a bad thing. After all, he had stopped using the technique long ago, so his insights were limited. What he knew for sure, though, was that he was not enjoying the feeling of having his entire life controlled on someone else's whims. Yet in front of a Tao Lord, there was nothing he could do about it. For now, he should just be grateful that the governor was thoughtful enough to have Lex cleansed of all contamination he himself had caused. Chapter 1481 Weeks. Lex closed his eyes and did his best to relax, well aware that there was a Tao Lord who was about to possibly treat his body. His system, which was not fused with his soul, was easily detectable if anyone looked into his soul, or so he assumed. Surely, it would not be able to hide from a Tao Lord, right? That was not his only concern either. He had no shortage of secrets, and he literally had no way of defending against, or even detecting the influence of a Tao Lord. The fact that just studying the sword technique 10 tribulations had infected him was good enough an example of how easily it was for Tao Lords to trick or manipulate him. But Lex had long given up worrying about the actions of beings far superior to himself, or he would go mad. All he could do was take things as they came. That was his last thought before the Tao Lord in front of him began her treatment, touching his forehead. His thoughts, and in fact even his soul, went into a dormant state. The influence was so strong that even Jack, who was in the middle of using his fairy dust to hold his ship together as it sailed over the surface of a hurricane originating from the river Styx while avoiding the giant skeleton trying to get him from inside the hurricane, was momentarily affected. As a result, the massive skeleton finally grabbed onto the ship, much to its own dismay. The skeleton immediately began to turn into gold and crystal at the same time. It started turning into a golden crystal. Jack didn't have the time to focus on Lex, not that it would have mattered if he could either. In that moment, Lex became entirely disconnected from him, and he had no way of checking in on him at all. Fortunately, it wasn't that the actual connection was severed, it was just that in a completely dormant state, Lex could give no feedback at all, or respond to any probes either. Jack's adventures continued, each one more harrowing than the last, to the point where he had to admit that he began to wonder if he had gotten in over his head. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do about it. He needed to contact the 7 dwarf dragons, for they were a unique force in the entire universe. There was literally no other precedent of so many siblings becoming Tao Lords in the history of the universe, which in itself made them a unique power. The greater source of their power was in the fact that they were dragons. The folklore realm was a unique realm in the universe, where the power of prestige and reputation, as well as stories and folktales, had a very real and tangible consequence. This meant that usually, it was almost impossible for foreign Tao Lords to overpower the local Tao Lords. But it also meant that when the Tao Lords from the folklore realm left the realm, a very large source of their power vanished, making them much weaker. As a result, hardly any powers from the folklore realm ever left. Considering that the realm was one of the largest realms in existence, it wasn't really a problem for most Tao Lords either. Much better than expected, Mary answered. Your soul was never even probed, and though the system was ready to enter a complete dormant state to hide from a Tao Lord, it was never required. Whoever treated you displayed the utmost professionalism and looked at nothing other than what was necessary. Lex accepted the answer, but did not necessarily believe it. It had already been proven that he was in no way equipped to scrutinize a Tao Lord's actions at all. For now, he could only accept that the outcome was as it appeared on the surface. It would only be later on, when he reached a similar state of power, that he could even begin to imagine examining himself for any traps he had fallen into. I'm ready to move on. What's next? Lex asked impatiently when he was finally freed of the chains binding him. He moved his body, as if to test his condition, but found no noticeable difference. The only actual difference was that he had completely forgotten about the details of the 10 tribulations. He had only barely remembered some of his personal experiences and theories about mixing sword intent and lightning, which didn't make sense somehow. Well, according to your itinerary, you will be shown to your living area as well as be allowed an opportunity to explore the resort on your own and mingle for a few hours. Following that, we will begin your first service, which involves entering an upper layer of heaven, and purifying your spiritual aura through incense therapy. Excellent. I am looking forward to meeting the other guests at the resort. Let's go. In truth, Lex was feeling a little impatient, which couldn't be helped. He had suddenly lost 3 weeks of time overnight, and didn't want to face any more unexpected surprises. After all, the midnight games were about to come to a close soon enough, and he didn't want to waste time doing something unproductive. Please follow me, Lycanderos said, standing in the back of the room. You were escorted to the treatment center while the procedure happened. From here, we can directly enter the common area for immortals. Lex followed his personal valet without question, and was both surprised, and not so surprised when he saw what the resort was like outside of the treatment facility. It was like a galaxy, but condensed into a much smaller space. Cosmic clouds seemed to make up entire buildings, and the lights from their windows shone like stars in the distance. Futuristic vehicles flew all around the skies, while glowing seraphim and guests of all races walked and strolled on the streets that, themselves, looked like they were forged out of the night sky. Chapter 1482 Angel Baddie's Eye. Lex felt as if he was standing inside a sci-fi movie made by someone on mushrooms. The vibrancy and energy saturation of his surroundings threatened to overwhelm him. He was hit with a deluge of new colors he had never seen, and could not describe in simple words. Instead, he could only describe them with emotions and sensations. The sky, predictably, was filled with a color that smelled like fresh rain over a garden. Many buildings were made of a color that felt like the first bite of a meal after a long, arduous fast. The wind, for indeed the wind had color, was like the first big gulp of chilled, refreshing lemonade after a hard day's work out in the sun. The grass was, oddly enough, like the smell of freshly cut grass. The pavement was like the first day of summer holiday after school. Everything was splendid and exciting just to look at, let alone the way it felt. The actual wind, which was a visible force of nature here, touched upon Lex's skin, soul, and spirit sense all at the same time, delivering a refreshing sensation that was different from anything he had ever felt. It was not mind-numbing, nor did it have a huge impact. It was just a subtle thing, one of 1,000 others, that made Lex feel pleasant. Who knew that heaven wouldn't make Lex feel an overpowering feeling of elation or glee, just an unrelenting pleasantness and mirth that made it damn near impossible to feel down regardless of what was bothering him. It was so mild that Lex could easily get used to it if he didn't specifically pay attention to it. It would only be upon leaving this place that its absence would hit him like a truck-kuan. Speaking of whom, Lex was pretty sure he caught a glimpse of truck-kuan casually driving wearing a hula ring made of flowers. If he was here, that would probably explain why he was usually so hard to find. It was through careful nurturing and prompting that Lex had gotten them to express themselves and build a community. It was their individuality that built such a close-knit network between the inn workers, and if it hadn't been for that, then they wouldn't have been able to help him when he went to war with Sanguis Pluvia. They would have been the idea workers for the inn, but little else. Similarly, the environment at the inn, while not as peacefully joyful as the resort, was a lot more comfortable and friendly. The resort is vast, but is strictly divided into areas depending on the type of packages a guest avails, as well as the cultivation realm, Lycanderos continued. Since you are an immortal, and have a premium package, then you will be brought to the Edgar Temple, which is the community hub for the premium package. From there, you may roam about at your leisure. I will come and get you in 6 hours for one of the resort's most coveted services called Heaven's Guidance. As it turned out, the Edgar Temple was not a building, but a subrealm. Basically, it was just an area of the resort that was cut off from the rest of it, which could only be accessed by a special few. Lex followed Lycanderoth in expecting to see something else amazing, and indeed he was right. But it was not the heavenly magnificence of the temple that caught Lex's eye, nor was it the flourishing divine energy and countless deity plants that were visible at a simple glance. No, what mesmerized Lex were the angel baddies that were in the temple, each of them radiating an awesome power and beauty so mesmerizing it stunned him. It was then that Lex had two revelations. The first, which was obvious, was that as one's cultivation level increased, so did their general appearance and attractiveness. So if there were a race of already beautiful beings, then in the celestial realm their mere appearance had a stronger effect than countless charm techniques. The second revelation he had was that the reason why he was showing such a sudden interest in wanting to date someone was because. Chapter 1483 Angel Baddies 2. As a cultivator, and more importantly as an immortal, Lex had perfect control over his body. He could literally control every individual drop of blood, tense every single muscle and manipulate the signals passing through every one of his nerves. Obviously, he did not actually take to controlling every fiber of his being because his body was more than capable of operating on his own. Also, while he had increased his knowledge tremendously, he was not arrogant enough to believe he had gained insights into the workings of his own cultivation technique, so he didn't want to inadvertently interfere with anything. As such, while he was usually aware of countless changes happening in his body, he hardly paid attention to them. Except, when he entered Edgar Temple, and glanced at the dozen celestial immortal angels, each one of them stunning enough to put any supermodel to shame, and his body suddenly underwent a sharp change, Lex was forced to pay attention. That revealed instantly something he hadn't noticed at all, and out of sheer arrogance never expected either. His body had, once upon a time, regrown into that of a baby. Now, as a cultivator his growth was meant to be incredibly slow and under ordinary circumstances it would have taken him centuries if not millennia to age enough to grow into the body of an adult. But his life wasn't normal, and he got a shortcut back to adulthood. Now he had assumed that meant he was back to his old self. Apparently not, for Lex was now going through puberty, and a dozen angel baddies standing in front of him, looking as hot as the sun, were causing a reaction in his body. Fortunately Lex had perfect control over his body, so he put that nonsense to rest and entered the state of flow. It had been a long time since he needed to rely on the flow state, but eliminating all his emotions was exactly the thing he needed right now. While he pondered on the numerous possibilities of such an audacious act by the resort, one in which he had inadvertently participated, he also noticed that the angels he had previously definitely not ogled at were walking towards him. "Lex Williams of the Midnight Inn, your reputation precedes you," said the woman walking in the lead, wearing a silver-colored armor that perfectly complemented her white wings and glowing golden hair. "Thank you for your recognition, though I am embarrassed to admit I do not recognize you," Lex said humbly, turning to look towards her. In his flow state he could be polite and formal, yet it wasn't so easy to be as casual as he normally was. In other situations, even in his flow state, he could manage such a thing despite reining in all his emotions. Yet in his current situation, he dared not relax his hold on his emotions even a little. That is not unusual at all. For various reasons, our identities have been kept hidden. My name is Shireen El Harkin, and I am the most hopeful of my generation of Valkyries to become a Dowlord. These are my sisters in arms, all fine Valkyrie warriors. Now that introductions are over, I wonder if it might be possible to sit down for a meeting. There is a matter that I would love to work with the Midnight Inn on. It's good to meet you, Shireen. I'm not sure how I can help you, but I'd love to chat with you. Lex was expecting the angels to lead him somewhere, or at least sit down before they began the conversation. Instead, Shireen got right into the thick of things. "I've heard that you can teleport to the Midnight Inn from anywhere, and that it's notoriously difficult to stop its teleportation capabilities. I would like to use that ability to teleport to the inn, and escape my fate as a political prisoner here in the Seraphim Resort. How can we make that happen?" Chapter 1484 Secret History I. Lex showed no reaction at all, as if what the group of distractingly attractive angels had just said was not a big deal at all. In fact, in his flow state, Lex even considered that the angels had somehow increased their attractiveness using some kind of charm technique to make him more cooperative for their meeting, yet he discarded that thought right after. There was no way for them to know when, or even if at all, he would be coming to the resort. The fact that he was even coming here was known to only a few. Moreover, his timing had not really been scheduled, and even if it had, he spent a good deal of time getting traces of a Tao Lord's influence removed from himself. He further considered that maybe his arrival was leaked by someone from the resort, such as Lakandaroth, but he doubted that even more. Before we continue the discussion, I think I need to make a few things clear about the Midnight Inn, said Lex calmly. Although the inn sometimes takes refugees and guests who are in need, we do not concern ourselves with the general political situation of our guests. Whether they are prisoners or jailers, regardless of their background, the Midnight Inn is open to anyone who wishes to come, so long as they follow the rules of the inn. Your predicament would, normally, be especially easy to resolve. All you would need to do is use the golden key, and it would take you from your location to the Midnight Inn. However, as it is, the Midnight Inn is undergoing certain renovations and teleportation services have ceased for the foreseeable future. At the same time, Lex was having a different conversation with Mary. Mary, this has been an issue from the very start, Lex lamented. Between criminals running away from their prison cells, and criminals hiding inside the inn until they're ready to come out to commit some kind of crime, the inn's teleport feature has too much potential to cause havoc. More importantly, it's only a matter of time before we offend someone really big. If I hadn't blocked off teleportation from other realms for new guests, I'm pretty sure I would have offended the resort. A literal resort that can use a Tao Lord as a doctor for a mere mortal is not someone I want to offend anytime soon. Yeah, even I can't defend the system for that, Mary said in her new cosplay outfit, though calling it an outfit might not have been enough. She was lying in a hospital bed with a cartoonish thermostat sticking out of her mouth, a drip placed right next to her and a bunch of get-well-soon balloons tied to the edge of the bed. There were also bandages tied around her head, and her left leg was in a cast and raised up in the air by a piece of cloth holding it up. If that's the case, there is no urgency, is there? Whether you escape tomorrow or in 1,000 years, it is all the same. It's not like you're coming to any harm here. There is no set deadline, yes, but that does not mean that there is no rush. The circumstances of the Eden realm are ever-changing, and unrest has spread through the lands. Even though we are prisoners, as long as we do not leave the Edgar Temple, we are free to do as we please. As such, we have many ways of keeping up with the latest news. Tensions are rising, and if conflict between angels and seraphim picks back up, we will be the first to be sacrificed. Do you think the chances of war starting back up again are likely to happen soon? Lex asked. Not yet, but the signs are there. In the next few thousands of years, I'd be surprised if nothing major happens. It's unsurprising, considering that major realms that are not controlled entirely by unified, or a single faction are more likely to be targeted than others. Thousands of years. Hearing such a timeline put Lex at peace, for much would change in that much time. He was sure that he would be able to reopen teleportation by then. After all, if the current trajectory of his growth was anything to go by, he should be a celestial immortal in a few thousand years. That was not slow progress, despite seeming like it only had the heavenly immortal realm in between. Most immortals never reach the celestial realm, and those that do are usually hundreds of thousands of years old. Jotun himself was somewhere around 450,000 years old if Lex recalled correctly. Well, I am in no position to state when the inn will be done with renovations, but I don't expect it will take thousands of years, said Lex, reassuring the angels. Do you mind sharing some of the history of the angels and the seraphims with me? I am not too familiar, but this resort seems great. It's hard to believe that the angels are able to fight against them for this place. Shireen did not immediately respond. Instead, her eyes seemed to lose focus, as if she had lost herself in her memories. It was a time of prosperity for the humanoid alliance, said one of the other Valkyries, taking off her helmet and placing it aside. The humans had not yet completely declined, and the Celestials, alongside the Olan, had jointly defeated all invading forces, maintaining hold over all 13 major realms that the humanoid alliance controlled. But our forces were spread thin, and though we had established our place in the universe, how long we could hold it was yet to be seen. That is when the devils and the angels joined together and for a daring and unexpected plan that shocked the entire universe. The devils set their gaze on the hells, and the angels set their sights on the heavens. But what nobody knew was that together, the two had set their eyes on a much greater prize than mere control over a major realm. They had set their sights on a secret of the cosmic ascendance spectrum. Chapter 1485 Secret History 2. A secret of the spectrum? Lex repeated, surprised to hear such a thing. The cosmic ascendance spectrum was something Lex had heard mention of frequently, for it dictated so much. The entire way in which the many races lived and operated within the universe was entirely dictated by that spectrum. Of course, Lex could not say for certain if it was because of the spectrum, or if the spectrum merely recorded the order of those races. Either way, there was a very real, very tangible benefit for being higher up on that list. As such, it was easily understandable why someone might want to learn its secrets. It was just that Lex didn't believe those secrets could so easily be learned. The fact, then, that Shireen was so casually mentioning it to him, without knowing him all that well, must be that it was already common knowledge by now. Indeed. As it turned out, the angels and the devils stumbled upon a secret of the cosmic ascendance spectrum which involved having control over both a heaven and a hell. But their plans remained undetected till almost the very end. The devils, with their innate cunning and resourcefulness, set an elaborate trap, ultimately ousting a majority of all Hellions from Garvitz, and took control. At the same time, the entire race flocked to Garvitz, turning it into their racial hub across the universe. Objectively speaking, for the devils this was a good move. For the humanoid alliance, however, it presented a moment of weakness that the enemies of the race took full advantage of. The Celestials were locked to their realms, unable to help, while the humans, once one of the more powerful members of the alliance, suddenly faced outright suppression the likes of which it had never seen. By this time, the angels had managed to take control of a majority of Eden, but they hadn't been able to do so in its entirety. Countless enemies of the humanoid alliance took this opportunity to help the seraphim to prevent the angels from gaining a stronghold and strengthening the alliance overall. They reached a deadlock that continued for a very long time, and the angels, despite not having control over the entirety of the realm, began to gain benefits from the partial control. They gained control over divine energy, and unlocked a partial transformation, much like the devil's complete transformation. Just when it seemed like the angels would eventually gain control over the realm, the humans fell. Through betrayal and deceit, their Tao lords were cornered and killed, one of the most deadly confrontations in recent history. It is exceptionally rare for a Tao lord to die, so the death of multiple Tao lords shocked the entire universe, and significantly weakened the entire humanoid alliance. I was a warrior, always fighting. I did not get a chance to learn the deeper secrets of our alliance, all I knew was the situation of the battlefield. Though she said that, Lex could not help but notice a subtle shift in the angel's body language as she said that, as if she felt incredibly uncomfortable discussing the topic. A few ideas popped into his head, but he did not reveal any signs of noticing the change. After all, he didn't believe that a celestial immortal couldn't control their body as they wished. Either it was bait, or there was something seriously wrong with these celestials, both of which could be very real possibilities. I can't believe that even you, as a candidate to become a Tao Lord, did not know these things. I might have known them once, Shireen said. But all sensitive information would have been wiped from my memory before being handed over as a prisoner. It makes it that much easier for me to be abandoned by the angels. I see. In that case, do you happen to know how exactly the human Tao lords were killed? Or who killed them? I don't know the details, I never fought on those battlefields. All I know is that the humans suffered some kind of massive betrayal. Back before their decline, the humans were just as powerful if not more so than devils and angels, and had especially strong diplomatic ties. As one of the most widespread races in the universe, far more than even elves and dwarves, humans had an immense innate advantage over everyone. They were honored guests wherever they went, from the treasure hoards of dragons to the majestic halls of the Henali to even the spirit mountains of beasts. At the same time, they were feared wherever they held domain, for their adaptability made almost the entire universe a habitable place. Conversely, when they fell from grace, hardly any of their former allies continued their relationships, with many of them even turning outright hostile. Beasts, especially, took to hunting humans as a sport, while even the devils among the humanoid alliance used humans as fodder to farm their demons. Perhaps only the Henali remained faithful to their old alliances. With such a massive falling out, it's hard to say who exactly was the one that betrayed them. At least it is not public knowledge. Lex sighed, as if he was lamenting the past. In truth, he was trying to determine how much of what he had heard was true, and how much of it was false. It was basically impossible that the resort didn't know about the angels approaching him, so he decided that this was likely some kind of indirect bait for him by the resort to see how the inn would treat its prisoners. Whether Shireen was complicit in such a plan was not something he could guess, nor did it actually matter. Chapter 1486. You need therapy. There was one other matter that Lex did not understand, a very crucial matter at that. He could, to a degree, understand the devils and angels not helping each other. They were striving for some secret Nephilim plan for which they could not take each other's help. But why didn't the other races within the humanoid alliance help each other? In fact, they almost seemed especially racist towards each other, at least as far as Lex had experienced. For example, the devils especially liked to use humans to nurture their demons. The elves and dwarfs hated each other with a passion. The celestials seemed to have an extreme superiority complex. Meanwhile, the humans were down on their luck and the fairies literally had their entire race cursed to be slaves or servants. How could they be called an alliance if they literally did not help each other? Also, how could the human race be betrayed yet the other races not be? Why didn't the celestials, who seemed to be the leaders of the alliance, coordinate between the races more? Then again, it was just an alliance, and that did not mean they had to experience weal and woe together. There could be all kinds of alliances, so as long as they ensured basic survival of each other, it was good enough. Another thing he wondered about was the strength of the angel race, as well as the humanoid alliance. The Seraphim Resort seemed incredibly powerful to Lex in the beginning, being able to host Tao lords from across the realm without fear. Yet now the angels alone were supposedly more powerful than the Seraphim. If Lex included the various other races within the alliance, how many Tao lords would that be? Could it be in the hundreds? Or maybe even thousands? Shireen shook her head, though her expression didn't soften at all. There are no good options left for my sisters and I. An option that suddenly appears and sounds too good to be true. I don't believe it is real. The choice, then, that I have to make is death by action or death by inaction. Neither is too appealing a choice. Lex shook his head, disappointment clear on his face. You are too cynical. For now, everything is speculation on your part, and there are too many ways in which the future could change, yet you have already decided that for you the future only holds death. If you continue like this, you will fulfill your own prophecy of death, even if it doesn't need to be like that. The only thing certain in life is death, Shireen said, getting ready to leave. The only thing in your control, hopefully, is how you die. Oh man, you need some serious therapy, Lex said, disagreeing with her. What's the big deal if you die? What's so great about it if you don't? You should live a life actually worth living, enjoying yourself, and seeking fulfillment in your actions. Of course, given your situation, it's not exactly fitting to just kick up your feet and relax. No doubt, life as a prisoner isn't exactly how you'd prefer to spend your time. But you also won't find any allies to help you out if you treat everyone coldly. Lex tossed golden keys towards the angels. It won't work now, but when the inn is open, you can use the keys to get there. If the Seraphim find a way to block the keys, then the inn will also find a way to unblock them. As for what you decide to do, or choose to believe, that's entirely up to you. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go explore this place a little." It was ironic that Lex was convincing them to trust the more when he was actually really concerned about them bringing trouble his way by coming. But what could he do? He'd learnt long ago that ignoring the system's mandate of constantly promoting the got him very troublesome quests. Before he left, however, Lex took a quick glance at their karma. Chapter 1487 Aerial Pegasus Polo. Now Lex's comprehension of karma was severely lacking, and even the technique to view contractual karma that he hadn't mastered yet. It was oddly refreshing to finally encounter techniques he didn't instantly master, though he knew it was stupid to think that way. His ability to instantly master defensive techniques had helped him survive countless dangers, and his ability to quickly master other offensive techniques only made his life much easier. The first time he encountered real trouble with learning a technique was when they dealt with something Lex had labeled mystic principles, mostly because it was easy to remember and it also adequately defined what was happening. They exchanged the normal, fundamental principles of reality, as Lex understood them, and replaced them with more mystical principles. Things like using emotions to generate heat, or willpower to make his sword sharper, or indigestion to make his brain work faster all adhered to mystic principles. There seemed to be no fundamental connection between the two, but it worked. Of course, Lex eventually learned that as well as he experienced more of the universe, and gained newer perspectives. Now though, with techniques related to karma, it was just plain difficult to learn. Compared to other immortals he was still learning at lightning speed, but he was still nowhere close to learning the full technique let alone mastering it. Lex wasn't sure what to expect when he looked at their karma. Heck, he even felt like he might not be able to view their karma at all. Most certainly he expected their karma to be impressive since they had lived such interesting lives. They were also close to becoming a Tao Lord, and that in itself was far from ordinary. The only thing they all had in common was their dependence on bloodlines to cultivate, as far as Lex could tell. Yet that didn't really help him in identifying them from appearance. Unsure of how exactly to start up a conversation with the other guests here, who all seemed pretty busy with their own affairs, Lex did the only reasonable thing. He went to a bar. Or more specifically, he went to a large, hovering bar above a lake of shining liquid where a crowd of observers were watching a game of aerial Pegasus polo, which was exactly as it sounded, and was surprisingly entertaining to watch. There were 9 members in each team, each of them holding a different weapon. No, those were probably specialized polo sticks and just coincidentally looked like spears and halberds and hammers. He also ignored that the ball they were all pummeling occasionally, while taking a break from trying to kill each other, was constantly cursing at anyone who hit it. Nothing ever harmed the ball, it was too tough for that. But the more it swore, the harder it was beaten. Quite entertaining. This seems like a lot of fun. Anyone care to explain the rules of the game? Lex said as he approached a particularly excited group of daffodils. It's aerial Pegasus polo, what's there to explain? The ball is a spiritual treasure made from Nephrin jade, so it's almost indestructible, and does not accumulate damage. However, every time one of them hits the ball, their weapon gains a charge which increases its power. If they use that weapon to attack another player, they lose that charge. The game continues until someone accumulates enough charge on their weapon to shatter the ball in a single hit. Naturally, shattering the ball gives many points, but that does not mean whoever shattered the ball is the automatic victor. Things like accumulated charge, airtime, opponents defeated all contribute to the points. It's really quite fun. Each game lasts, on average, 3 months, so it's just good enough to distract you for a while. Sounds like fun. Can anyone play? Lex asked. Chapter 1488 Another Lotus. The daffodil looked towards Lex. At least, that's what he assumed was happening, since the flower didn't have eyes or lips or anything like that. Instead, it just faced the front of its flower towards Lex and seemed to study him. In theory, anyone can play, but in practice it's not so simple. First of all, you would need a team, and then you'd need that team to be sufficiently qualified. Although the matches here in Edgar Temple are just exhibition matches, to even get invited the team needs to have won a number of matches previously in reputable stadiums. Preferably, you need a few championships under your belt as well. Going back even further, to be able to play in any stadium requires that your team have already played and won in smaller, locally recognized tournaments that have a history of at least 100 years. Now technically anyone can fulfill those requirements and get an opportunity to play here. In practice though, only the elite of the elite get such an opportunity. The Federation of Aerial Pegasus Polo is an interrealm organization, by the way, so the number of teams on the waitlist to play here is absolutely massive. Even if you got all of those qualifications today, you'd have to wait thousands of years for your turn at least. I don't mind, this looks like fun, said Lex looking at the ball screaming out a yo mama joke, or rather insult. How does one go about joining a team? Or registering at the Federation? I've never seen this game before. Yeah, you have to be in a place with abundant pegasi for the game to naturally occur, and then wait for the Federation to find such a place on their own. It's a long and tedious process, but it can't be helped. Most of us just enjoy watching the games. It's a pretty standard here in the resort. But then again, I haven't seen you before. Are you new here? Where are you from? Yeah, the name is Lex. I'm from the Origin Realm. Got gifted a coupon for the resort by someone I know. What about you? Spend a lot of time at the resort? The name is Daffy Dill. I've been here for about 3,000 years, and I have a few hundred more left. The place I'm from is experiencing a violent revolution, so I just hopped on over to the resort to sit it out. War, believe it or not, is not great for my petals. Yeah, war, what is it good for, am I right? Say Daffy, since you've been here a while, do you mind giving me any tips on things I should try out? I only have a couple of weeks here. Oh, heaven's guidance and the holy baptism. You should get those too as soon as possible, they're the best. It's quite unfortunate that you can only experience both only once during your lifetime, or I'd spend all my money to just constantly visit those two. 2 weeks is not really a lot of time, so you'll miss out on some great options, but maybe take some time to stroll through the gardens. As the conversation continued, Lex discovered that Daffy was actually a deity plant, one that required no worship or followers to produce its own divine energy. As such, he had a huge discount coming to the resort. Lex was led to a circular chamber containing a lush, green meadow, with a purple and white lotus right in the center, one that was all too eye-catching. Lex felt a subtle warmth from his back, and knew in an instant what he was looking at. Is that a lotus from the Primordial Origin Lotus series? He asked. The World Seed Lotus he was bonded to was also one of the flowers from that series. You have a good eye. Most guests have never even heard of this series. That is a brimming dream lotus, and it will serve as a conduit for the resort to allow you to receive the guidance. Lex wanted to ask if he could take the brimming dream lotus as well, but had a feeling that such a thing was not included in the premium package. Still, it was rare for the lotus on his back to show a reaction to something, so he would try to get his hands on it. But first, the guidance. There was no need to delay a good thing for any reason. Please sit on the lotus cross-legged, and enter a meditative state. The guidance will begin soon. Lex took off his shoes because he didn't feel right stepping on the lotus with them. Then again, sitting on it was technically not much better, so he did the only justifiable thing and pushed those thoughts out of his mind. With his eyes closed, Lex allowed his mind to relax a bit, his many thoughts wandering. He could feel a barrier slowly erect itself between Lex and Jack, isolating their experiences from each other for a while, though they could still feel each other's presence. A lotus tattoo began to bloom on his back, though it did not grow nor did it transfer any powers to Lex. At first, Lex thought the tattoo was just there and wouldn't do anything. But how could that be? Good old Lotus had never failed to contribute a great amount to Lex's growth, and it wouldn't start now. It began channeling some energy from itself down into the lotus below Lex, making its effects stronger. Before Lex even realized it, he fell into a trance as a bright light shone down on him. What do you want to learn about? It was not a voice, but a question that just appeared in his absent mind. Karma, Lex responded out loud. Chapter 1489 Hardcore Drugs. Lex had never done drugs, not really. He had seen the occasional movie about what it feels like to do heavy drugs though. Trippy visions, feeling lightheaded, vibrant colors and so much more. Honestly, it was a little enticing, but he did not want to get addicted and dependent on drugs, so he never really considered it. But nobody told him that if he went to heaven they would give him the drugs and call it a very expensive service. When Lycanderoth had told Lex that he would learn about whatever he wanted, he thought he'd be getting some kind of lecture, or maybe some kind of cosmic data uploaded directly into his brain. Nope, none of that happened. Instead, he lost the ability to think entirely, and his mind was opened up to only be able to experience things. Every part of his immortal mind was completely occupied as he saw a vision of himself drifting across what could only be summarized as a rainbow road. There was a carpet of 1,000,000,000,000 colors below him and a galaxy of random things above him. He did not need to pay attention to the colors below or objects above, for he was aware of all of them all at once. Between pure white and eggshell white and 100,000 other whites, there were just as many shades of red and blue and green and orange. Above him were peaches and gorillas and angry turtles with different colored shells. As he continued to float, the colors and objects started to converge, and as each color mixed with each object, they transformed into something else entirely. Cold pizza fused with the color gold and transformed into a master's degree, whereas when a dark blue fused with cold pizza it turned into a gravestone. When purple fused with a park it turned into a wedding ring, and when red fused with a park it turned into skin cancer. Green fused into glass and turned into a bottle of olive oil, but when a lighter shade of green fused with glass it turned into an oppressive government in a small island nation. Just when Lex felt like he would be overwhelmed by the fusion of trillions of colors and objects, a soothing sensation flowed into his body from somewhere, helping him cope with the burden, allowing for the vision to go into its next phase. Now, alongside colors and objects, emotions showed up, and the scale of the vision became so vast that Lex's mind should not have been able to tolerate it at all. How are the divine blood reserves looking? As per protocol, we have to supply enough for a 2-minute buffer, so now we've extended it to 4 minutes. We'll need to prepare more for all the other guidances we have planned today. Production has been slow lately. I've cut off energy to the lotus and the crystals are drained, but it's still active somehow. How is that possible? The brimming dream lotus needs an external energy source to operate. That damn plant is already past its prime. We should have replaced it 10,000 years ago. It's probably going to drain its own energy reserves and die while the guidance is still going on. Shit, we can't afford a guidance to be interrupted or the guest will suffer a backlash. Provide it with a 1% required energy stream. Hopefully, it will slow down to match the low energy input. What the hell is going on? How is that guy still receiving a guidance? There has never been an Earth immortal who has passed the 3-minute mark. There's something wrong. The rate at which the divine blood is being used has increased by 15%. We need to increase the supply. We have a code blue. I repeat, we have a code blue. Divine energy from across the resort has started flowing towards the guidance dome. Something unexpected is happening. Immediately summon the Tao Lords. I'm already here, said a seraphim that suddenly appeared, her wings seemingly made of light just like her skin. I can see the issue. That lotus has somehow tapped into the energy reserves of some unknown realm. If it doesn't stop, this guidance could go on 4 hours. Pin-drop silence suddenly filled the hall, as everyone tried to wrap their heads around the horrifying words that they'd just heard. Chapter 1490. No sense. The guidance dome is under the protection of heaven itself, the Tao Lord said in a solemn voice. Even Tao Lords cannot interfere without interrupting the guidance. In fact, if a Tao Lord tries to interfere, they will suffer a backlash. Heaven's guidance is no joke. I want to find out who the hell does maintenance? Why didn't they spot the issue with the lotus? Somewhere else in the resort, a janitor who was about to enjoy his lunch suddenly went pale. For some reason, he had a very bad feeling he couldn't explain. Sir, what should we do for now? Asked one of the seraphim in the office. The guest has been receiving his guidance for 4 minutes already, and though we've increased the reserve resources to support 6 minutes, I don't know how much longer we can keep this going. For a moment the Tao Lord did not respond, but then shook her head. The one who paid for this premium package is the governor of the origin realm. We cannot afford to offend the Hanali like this. Tap into our resource reserves for the next 100 years. No matter what happens, we cannot afford to have this guidance interrupted. As the rest of the seraphim ran around like frightened mice, the Tao Lord thought of the irony of the situation. She remembered how, long ago, natural guidance is used to last for hours or even days. But in an effort to improve the efficiency and potency of the guidance, numerous ingenious ways had been created to make it more powerful. Yet as a result, those undergoing guidance couldn't tolerate the immense pressure it caused their psyche. This was because each guidance was specifically designed for the person undergoing it, keeping their limitations within consideration. By increasing the potency of the guidance, they created an unexpected situation where no one was actually able to experience the whole guidance. Time flowed by minute, robbing the seraphim of resources many times the entire cumulative MP that the inn had ever collected, yet Lex had no knowledge of it. He was still in his trance, witnessing colors, objects, emotions, and intentions mixed together, giving birth to completely unpredictable results. Sometimes, the end result was so complex and sophisticated that in his current condition Lex had no way to entirely comprehend what it was. Other times, the result was ridiculously simple. He saw hunger and the color red fuse with a flower to give birth to a rock band. He saw cartoons and pink and love give birth to an entire generation of emotionally stable adults. He saw emotionally stable adults lead to a time of loss and famine and war. For without the inherent flaws in their personalities to motivate them to action, societies declined. He saw the decline of empires mix with the color brown, and the intention to survive blend with hopelessness, and of everything, it resulted in homework. If he still had the capacity to think, Lex would have wondered what any of this had to do with karma. As he could not think, he could only continue to observe, absorbing all the information like a sponge. Each fusion segment became longer and longer, as one more element was added to it each time, causing the equation to become even more complex and unpredictable. A more complex equation did not mean that it made any more sense, nor did a simple one mean that the end result was predictable. There was no pattern to be discerned at any step, with the only thing that seemed to follow any kind of rule was that one of each, a color, an emotion, an object and some kind of intention were added to the equation. Until that changed, that is. When the number of independent variables in each equation reached 10, all rules seemed to break down. Colors were added to colors, objects were added to objects. Some equations were 10 variables long, while others had hundreds, or even as small as 1. A single color, without any other variable or input, sometimes resulted in an outcome other than that color. It was an absolute mess, almost as bad as the mess outside, where the seraphim were panicking because Lex's guidance had lasted over 20 hours.